You're listening to Sips of Sanity, your toolkit for emotional and intuitive intelligence, or what we like to call the dirty work. Let's do it.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
And oh my God, I'm actually high-ing you with my hand.
I saw. It was really cute. Like we haven't been here recording session 1 the whole time.
And hi, patrons. Welcome to day 2 of Undermining Week. The first one we're going to talk about today is criticism.
Okay.
I would imagine that many people expect this to be in this week. And what we're going to talk about is what constant criticism does.
I also want to say that I'm really excited for patrons. Everyone knows we relax in day 2 through 5, right? Mm-hmm. That you guys were probably all very prepared to be like, they're going to talk about verbal abuse. I can't wait to see. And it's like you're hearing already, okay, criticism is one of those things. Of course, we're going to be talking about that because it works to undermine. Now, what is very confusing to a lot of you and is very fair is that undermining is on the list of verbal abuse. But what you're actually hearing in this series is that all of the forms of verbal abuse work as tools or tactics to undermine. So remember, a lot of you are in book club as well. We talk a lot about padded lists, right? Mm-hmm. So when we see from authors, whether it's in books or articles or peer-reviewed journals, when we see a list that is round, and I don't mean even numbers, but could be 5, could be 10, could be 15, like Patricia Evans did with the 15 forms of verbal abuse, oftentimes there's redundancy, right? Mm-hmm. Where things could really be put together, and undermining is what all of the forms of verbal abuse are doing. So yes. When you guys studied it previously and had a hard time differentiating between a couple of these things, this is why. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about criticism. I just criticized the shit out of her list.
No, I didn't see it as criticism of her list. I saw it as critiquing of the list.
Yes, thank you.
So, and I think critiquing is different than criticism.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Critiquing is for improvement.
Yes, which I know as an Enneagram 1, that you critique a lot because you work towards what is most efficient for people to process in their thinking, which I think is great. It's all good. I still love her list and love her book. And I still love the fact that we can take that whole list and say all of them could go under undermining. Mm-hmm. She could have called that book Undermining, and it's 14 faces.
And yet, we really needed it to be labeled verbal abuse to start taking it fucking seriously.
Yes, and for her to grab people's attention.
Yeah.
I think if she had called it Undermining and it's 14 faces, nobody would have bought it.
Right.
Right?
Or understood how abused they actually are.
Yeah.
Because undermining is a form of abuse.
Yes. So, constant criticism. These can be tiny, tiny little criticisms. They can be repeated criticisms. But the whole point of a person using criticism at all is to undermine your self-esteem, your perception of yourself, and equally importantly, your ability to think, your ability to assess and to be present.
So let's talk about how that happens. Right? So if you are going about your life used to making your decisions for how you dress, how you eat, any decision that you're making in your life, and now these constant criticisms are coming in about these seemingly small things, your brain starts to scramble, right? You start to anticipate the criticism coming because you said it was constant. And so rather than going about making your decisions like you normally do, that little voice is in your head of, they're going to say this. They're going to say, what about this? They're going to make me consider something else. And you might be thankful for that in the beginning. You might be like, oh, it's good. They make me think. And then all of a sudden, all you're thinking of is what that criticism is going to be. That's the scramble. You're no longer thinking for yourself.
Yes.
And now your brain, your thought process has been completely undermined and scrambled.
And it's perfect because it means that you're going to think the way they want you to think.
Yep.
Even when they're not around.
Yes.
Which is most important to them. They do it to you repetitively so that your ability to think for yourself doesn't exist. And that the way they want you to think, their rules, their opinions, their thoughts, their preferences will now be your default. It's like putting in a file system that, say their name is Bob. Then it's Bob's filing system in your brain instead of your own thinking. And so now when you go about doing things in life, you've got Bob's reference system in there, and that makes Bob happy. Does that make you present? No. Does that make you loved by Bob? No. Bob loves Bob.
Nice. And actually, I'd like to change my language then. It doesn't scramble your brain. It actually, like you mentioned, destroys it.
Yes, this is a destruction of your thinking. So then now Bob's not there and you go to work and you have to try and figure out, what does Bob think about this? And your bosses might be looking at you going, huh? What are you doing? You're not answering me. You didn't do this today. I've asked you for a week. And it's like, yeah, you don't know to say to them, yeah, Bob didn't tell me how to do this. I have to ask Bob. Mm-hmm. And so now you don't know because you don't have a structured system of your own identity and your own thinking process. It just doesn't even exist. So if we think about a computer, you just don't even have the program to run.
I also am going to level up here, okay? You can get to the point where all you are doing is thinking like Bob thinks, if this is the example that we're running with. Mm-hmm. At a certain point, you may become so good at it, so efficient at thinking how Bob thinks, that now he has to switch it up.
That's good.
Because if you are like confidently anticipating what he's going to say, confidently anticipating how he's going to want you to do things, or whoever Bob is in your head, okay?
Yeah.
And you start to have that confidence and, you assertiveness over, I'm certain that this is the way he'd like things done. Now you've got too much power again. Now you've got too much certainty again. And so the constant criticism has to change. So now all of a sudden, Bob wants something different. Bob thinks something different. Bob needs something different, whatever, however you want to word this. And you are thrown into confusion yet again because you think, well, I thought I knew. I thought I've mastered. I thought I was following.
It reminds me of Facebook and all of these software programs where you get the download and then you learn how to you learn how to use it according to that version. And then you get a little update saying version 2.5, version 3.6, version 4. And then you get prepared that I'm going to learn this version, but I know another version is coming and that I can only use this version for a while. And that the app or Microsoft or whatever, Apple, is going to send me an updated version. So I also know this is temporary and that I got to do it this way. And now I got to get prepared. I have to start thinking that I can do it this way, but I know it's going to change. So now I also have to become hyper vigilant for when that little version, that little message is going to come through, and how good can I get to know and anticipate when that version is coming.
Yeah, and I like that you're bringing that up because you're just talking about the interface of an app changing, which is completely true. And we're not, I won't get into if Facebook is undermining us, but it's really neat because you also have to kind of deaden your emotions at a certain point, right? Mm-hmm. Because when an interface is changing that often, you can't afford to get attached to liking this interface, right? You can do your best to understand it. You can do your best to follow it, I'll say, and adjust to it. But as soon as that new interface comes, when you just, from Wednesday to Thursday, you sign online and you're like, oh, everything's different. It's like there has to be a radical acceptance that this is just what it is because I need to continue using this app. Yes. So I can't think about what I feel. I can't think about how this is going to affect me in my day. I just need to do it.
And I when you said I can't think about what I feel, I want to hit the pause button right there because I know when the versions started coming in. I remember this with, I think it was Facebook, and you said, oh, Mom, it's an update. It's just the way the interface has changed. And I got mad.
Oh, I remember.
And you were like looking at me like, what are you mad about? This is just what it is. And you were in radical acceptance. And I was like, what is with this radical acceptance of change? And that fucking annoyed me. That it was so easily accepted that this company was going to give you something to use that was critical to running a business or whatever, and I have absolutely no control. And yet it's my business and I have zero control. That I could wake up on any morning of the week and a whole new system is there and I got to sit down and do that before I can see any of my clients. Really? That angered me. And it was like I looked at you and your radical acceptance and I thought, fuck you. I don't ever want to get to that place of radical acceptance. But I understand that it was such a trigger for me from past relationships with a church, with people, where I had done that radical acceptance and I knew how it had destroyed me. And so when I just saw that, even though maybe it was Facebook or something, that I had such an explosive anger towards it, that I had to walk away and go, okay, it's more than Facebook. But Facebook has figured out how to undermine us. Apple has figured out how to undermine us. Microsoft did. They've all done it. And they all do it repetitively. And they've pushed us into radical acceptance.
To the point that they're talking about having an uprising of AI that's going to destroy humanity right now.
What?
Yeah. AI is not abiding by the codes in which we asked it to operate. And we can't override it. This is a whole other conversation.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay. So this whole thing about this undermining is the purpose of it is so that we cannot think. And if you cannot think, you are not autonomous. You cannot make your own decisions. You cannot see anything that's unhealthy. And therefore, if you can't stop it. You can't change it. You can't be healthy. You can't be loved. You can't grow. You can't know who you are. And the very purpose of being in a human body as a soul is to discover who you are. So undermining is soul crushing. It is soul killing.
Okay, can I talk about what you just said? Because you said a lot of things in there that I want people to be able to break down and feel, have more of an understanding of. It's not that you can't think. If you are developing a practice of self-awareness, you can step into self-observation. Now, what undermining does or demands or triggers is a reaction out of you, which doesn't involve thinking. It involves reacting, which is engaging a part of your brain that is survival mechanism. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, etc. Right? Like we did that in a previous SIPS episode, actually. So there's an element of thinking. I just want to be very clear about this. There's still an element of thinking, but you've gone into survival mode. How can I survive? And that's not necessarily a conscious thought, but your brain is still functioning. And that's an important thing to note because not all hope has been lost. And if you're in the development of self-observation, if you are in the practice of it, you can observe that the undermining is happening. You can observe that survival mechanism is kicking in, and you can choose to not go down that path of reaction, but in a path of responding. Now, you're talking about you can be priming the brain to follow certain pathways and never try and break them, especially if you're never working at a self-observation practice. And just to give everyone hope, that is Friday. We're gonna talk about how to do that. We're gonna talk about how to support you in that. I don't want you to sit here and think like, oh, because I have been under constant criticism, I don't think, and feel that kind of loss of hope. Okay. You're just engaging one part of your brain.
Okay, that's great. Okay, thank you so much for giving us such great information about undermining, Kelly, in that first part with criticism. Now let's move to our second one, and that is interrupting. So interrupting is when somebody interjects, breaks your train of thought, stops you from speaking coherently, getting a point across, or telling a story, anything where the speaker has the attention and has the control and has, I'll say their thought processes are being explained or being shared with people. And so the person interrupting wants to interrupt all of that. The fact that they have someone else's attention, the interrupter sometimes doesn't like it. And now I understand that there's different types of interrupting. And I know I can just see your head moving in different directions of, well, yeah, but there's good interrupting where you go, and yes, and you encourage the person. Yes, that's not the interrupting that we're talking about. That's a form of undermining.
I'm actually very stuck on the idea way back when you just said that it's cutting someone off from speaking coherently. And I would like to add that you can cut someone off who is speaking incoherently as well.
True.
Their coherence is not a determining factor as to whether or not you cut them off.
Right.
Interrupting is simply cutting someone's thoughts or speech off.
Yes. Perfect. Efficiently said again.
Thank you. It was very difficult to not actually interrupt you in that. And I thought, what a terrible example this would be, and a great example if I actually interrupted you while you were explaining interrupting. That was painful and a little scary.
That's good. So the interrupter, when it's a form of undermining, really has an intention there to take attention away from the person who has the control or who has attention. For whatever their reason is. There's a number of reasons. We can go through all kinds of reasons. It just might be that they purposely want to undermine their power, or they want to throw them off. They want to be able to control what the listeners are thinking. They want to be able to control what the speaker's thinking. They want to control what the actions might be as a result of what's being said.
Yeah, and actually, I disagree with your statement that it's about taking attention away from that person. I think actually that you can interrupt someone and intend to keep the attention on them for the purpose of undermining.
You could do both. I would agree with both.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I could easily interrupt you while you're speaking, while we're amongst others, to ask you a question that undermines the way people view you and your thought process.
Yes.
I want the attention to stay on you, but as you mentioned, I want to control how they are thinking about you.
Yes, I want the audience or the people there to see you in less light, or I'll say with less power, or with less knowledge, or with less, it's just less.
Yeah, and in that process, I don't have to draw attention to myself at all. They might not even register that I'm on their mind when I asked that question. I can ask a question so good that they don't register that it's a great question.
Yeah.
And they're already thinking of how not credible you are.
Right.
People are brilliant at this.
Yes, they are. I suck at this because I hate it.
It's horrifying.
But, yeah, it is.
And I'm even thinking, like, if we are situated physically in a particular way where you are telling a story, I want everyone who's watching this to look at me. I can give you a look and go, to undermine if you're telling the truth. And if someone is situated in a way where they're looking at me, my look is now drawing attention to you to say, is she trustworthy? Is that even true?
So I like how you're pointing out that interrupting doesn't even have to be verbal.
No.
That it can be nonverbal cues.
I can lean away and sigh, like, I don't want to hear this again.
Right.
To make people think that you're a complainer. To make people think that you're an exaggerator.
Yeah. It could even simply be that they clear their throat.
And not once. I'm using the nonverbal, very, very silent one, though.
Right, yeah.
Where you might not even have skipped a beat in what you were saying.
Yeah.
You might not even have registered that I moved and made a motion of any kind. And I can have interrupted what was happening.
Yeah.
In terms of dynamics.
Yes. Kelly, thank you very much. I'm so glad that you brought up the nonverbal cues. I'm hoping that our patrons are going to sit there and go, oh my God, I need to be more aware of my own verbal and nonverbal cues as to when I'm actually interrupting somebody. Because I'm in my own thoughts and I want to come right back in, and I do it verbally. I'm terrible at interrupting other people. I do it verbally all the time. Or, oh my God, I'm an eye roller. Oh my God, I have such a habit. I didn't realize that my eye rolling was interrupting the other person. Well, you know that it is, because if they catch you eye rolling, you get a reaction out of them. So we're challenging you now. We're asking you to consider your verbal and your nonverbal cues as to how you undermine another person so that you can bring that awareness to yourself and correct yourself.
Okay. Awesome. So we've got more tactics coming on Wednesday.